Hi, my name's Alden, and I still remember the moment she said it, like it was nothing. Starting next month, your whole salary goes straight into my account, sweetheart. That was the moment I realized I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a financial hostage. That same night, she brought her entire family to my house, laughing, drinking, acting like they already owned everything I built. But what they didn't know was that while they were scheming, I was quietly preparing, and the look on her face when she saw what I'd done, you'll want to see that for yourself. I pulled into the driveway a little after 6, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes. The sun was dropping behind the neighbor's oak tree, and the house looked just like it always did at that hour. Quiet. Familiar. I walked in, shut the door behind me, and hung my keys on the wooden hook my father carved when I was a teenager. I still touch the smooth edge every time I come home. It's a silly habit, but it steadies me, the way some people touch a photo or say a small prayer under their breath. I set my lunch pail on the counter and kicked off my boots. The house smelled like lemon soap, which usually meant a calm evening. But when I stepped into the kitchen, I saw Marissa sitting at the table with papers arranged in neat rows. Her posture was straight, chin lifted, hands folded like she was running a meeting. That alone told me something was coming. She greeted me, but her voice lacked warmth. Not angry, just controlled. I'd heard that tone before, right before she'd tell me how I could improve something in my life. I opened the fridge for a cold drink, trying not to jump to conclusions. Still, the air felt stiff, the way it does before a storm. When I sat across from her, she didn't waste a second. Alden, starting next month, your entire $37,000 salary will be transferred directly to my account. I waited for her to smile, or laugh, or at least glance up like she was waiting for my reaction, but she kept her gaze firm, like she'd rehearsed the line in her head. I let out a quiet breath. You're making a joke, right? No, she said, taking a pen and tapping it once on the stack of papers. This is the best way to stabilize our finances. You're too generous with money, and it's hurting us. That caught me off guard. I've always paid every bill on time. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries, never missed. I tried to keep my tone steady. I think we've been doing fine. If you want to talk about budgeting, we can... She cut in. You hesitating like this proves exactly why this needs to happen. I'm the one who understands structure. Her wording stung more than I wanted to admit. Structure. As if I'd never managed anything in my life. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the table, weighing how hard to push back. I'd learned long ago that arguing too quickly only made things worse. She slid the next set of papers toward me. Every sheet had color-coded columns. Each column had her name listed beside the accounts. Mine wasn't anywhere. This is normal, she said. Plenty of couples do it. One person takes charge so things don't fall apart. I'm not against being organized, I said slowly, but transferring every paycheck to you feels... There it is, she snapped softly. That tone. You don't want to be a real partner. Real partners share everything. She said everything, like it meant surrender. I leaned back, breathing through the pressure building in my chest. Something was shifting, something I hadn't seen before. She wasn't asking. She wasn't even negotiating. She was declaring. Before I could say more, she reached for her phone and opened a settings screen. Let's make this easier, she said. Give me your banking password, email too. and your work portal, and your retirement login. Once I manage everything, you won't have to worry anymore." It took me a moment to process what she was actually asking. "My work login," I repeated. "I can't do that. It violates policy." "You're overreacting," she answered. "If you have nothing to hide, then giving me access shouldn't bother you." I felt heat rise in my neck. "It's not about hiding anything. It's about boundaries." She didn't like that word. Her jaw tightened. She reached for my phone on the table, trying to change the recovery number to hers. Reflex kicked in, and I placed my hand gently but firmly over the screen before she could swipe. Her eyes lifted to mine, shocked, not because she'd crossed a line, but because I had stopped her. It was the first moment that felt like a crack in whatever image she held of me. The room went quiet, almost painfully so. She finally stood, collecting the papers. "We'll talk again tonight," she said, her tone clipped. "I'll explain it to my family. They can help you see why this is necessary." That sentence didn't sound like a plan. It sounded like an intervention, a coordinated effort. I'd never needed help managing my own money, and certainly not from her parents or brothers. When she walked out of the kitchen, I stayed seated for a long moment. My hands rested flat on the table, but my breathing had turned shallow. Something was happening behind the scenes, and I wasn't supposed to notice, but I noticed. I glanced across the room at the wooden hook where my keys hung, the same one Dad made with his pocket knife. It had always meant home to me, safety, stability. Now I looked at it and felt a knot pull tighter below my ribs. Something was shifting under my feet, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. But I knew one thing. Tonight was going to change more than our bank accounts. They showed up at my door as if they already owned the place. It was just past 7. I hadn't had time to finish my sandwich or take a proper breath since the conversation with Marissa in the kitchen. The evening air was still clinging to that late summer humidity. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, trying to process everything, when the doorbell rang, sharp and fast. Then came the pounding. Not the casual knock of a neighbor or friend. This one had urgency, intent. I opened the door. There they were, Randall, Eudora, Jace, and Trent, all standing with the kind of confidence that said they were walking into their own house, not mine. Suitcases in each hand, grocery bags hooked around wrists. One of them even had a folded blanket tucked under his arm. And behind them, walking up like this was all completely natural, was Marissa, holding her phone and smiling like someone about to give a TED Talk. Randall was the first to speak, booming like he was on stage. "We figured we'd help reorganize your life, Alden. Heard you needed structure." I didn't even get a word in before Eudora added, "We'll stay a little while, just until everything settles." Her voice had that syrupy tone people use when they're pretending to be kind while bulldozing your boundaries. Not a single person asked, "Is this a good time?" or "Can we stay here tonight?" They just entered. The hallway swallowed them whole before I had the chance to close the door again. They moved like a team, not like family visiting for dinner, like a tactical unit with assignments. Trent went straight for the kitchen. I heard the distinct sound of something being unplugged. I walked over, and sure enough, he was holding my coffee maker in both hands, inspecting it like a flawed machine. "Yours is a little outdated," he said. I brought my own, faster brew time. Jace had disappeared down the hall, dragging a heavy suitcase behind him. A moment later, I saw him stuffing it into the hallway closet, pushing aside boxes and winter coats like they were trash. Eudora had already started critiquing the living room layout, eyeing the armchair I'd bought years ago with the first bonus I ever earned. "This whole space is cramped," she muttered. "We'll need to redo this area. Open it up for the family." I tried to find my voice, polite, steady. "I wasn't expecting overnight guests." Randall laughed, deep and dismissive. "Come on, Alden. Family doesn't need an invitation." I looked at Marissa, standing near the dining table, unbothered. She pulled out that same notebook she'd used during our conversation earlier. Her hand smoothed the pages like she was about to lead a business meeting. "This is all for your benefit," she said, not even sitting down. "They're here to help you transition into a healthier financial rhythm. Support and accountability are crucial." "I didn't ask for this," I replied, careful to stay calm. She tilted her head, like I'd confirmed something for her. "Exactly. That's the problem. You never take initiative." Her family nodded in eerie unison, like they'd rehearsed this speech. My mouth went dry. Randall pulled out a chair, my chair, and sat like he was the new man of the house. "So, Alden, what do you make again? 37,000? I opened my mouth, but Marissa beat me to it. 37, but I'm managing it now. He needs structure. Without me, he'd drown," Jace snorted. "Man, that's barely above entry level. You could do better selling used cars." Eudora sighed loud enough for the whole block to hear. "We'll teach him how adults handle money. This is just the beginning." Their words fell over me like cold rain, and yet I just stood there, breathing, listening. Every part of me wanted to push back, to tell them this was my home, my work, my life, but something told me this wasn't the time. They were waiting for a reaction. I wasn't going to give them one. I glanced toward the hallway, eyes landing on that wooden hook again. Dad's hook. The one I've used nearly every day since moving into this place. It used to be just me and that routine. A simple life. A good one. No one else had earned the right to disrupt it. And yet, here I was, standing in a house I paid for, while a bunch of uninvited people tore it apart, laughed at my job, and questioned my competence. A question surfaced, one I hadn't dared to ask until now. How far are they planning to push me? The answer felt dangerously close to, as far as I let them. Later that night, as I watched them casually settle into my space, folding laundry, opening drawers, adjusting the thermostat, I knew something was unraveling fast. This wasn't a family visit. This was an invasion masked in politeness. And somehow, I was the only one not pretending everything was okay. That thought stayed with me through the night, rising and falling in my chest like a weight I couldn't shift. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard drawers opening, bags unzipping, quiet footsteps moving through rooms that used to feel like mine alone. By sunrise, their intentions were clearer than ever, and far more dangerous. The first thing I noticed was the low hum of voices drifting from the kitchen. Not the gentle kind you hear when family makes breakfast together. These were clipped, business-like tones, the kind used by people sorting out someone else's life. I sat up slowly, letting the early light guide my steps toward the hallway. As I got closer, Randall's voice carried through the house. "So his utility bills aren't terrible, but his spending is scattered. We'll reallocate where needed." Jace responded, "Yeah, we'll shift the unnecessary stuff. He won't notice. Guy doesn't track anything anyway." They were using my bills, my papers, spread across the table like case files. I paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Randall leaned over my statements with the confidence of someone reviewing a subordinate's performance. Jace scribbled notes beside him, Eudora had every cupboard door open, rearranging dishes and muttering about proper order. She held one of my plates up to the light like she was judging it at a county fair. Marissa stood by the window, phone in hand. Her voice dropped into that polished tone she used at work, the one she used when she wanted to sound composed and authoritative. Yes, transfer. No, he won't mind. I'll sign for him if needed. I froze. She said it so easily. Like signing on my behalf was something she did regularly. Like it wasn't a violation, just a simple administrative task. I stepped farther into the kitchen, clearing my throat once so they knew I was there. Eudora glanced at me briefly, then went right back to reorganizing shelves she didn't own. That small exchange, that glance without acknowledgement, hit me harder than I expected. It felt like I had been removed from my own home and replaced with a placeholder version of myself. I forced my breathing to steady, choosing to watch rather than react. Every instinct told me to push back, but something deeper urged me to observe. People reveal the most when they think you're not fighting. A little later, Marissa called everyone to the dining table. "Let's get organized," she said, as if we were all part of some management retreat. The table was already covered in papers, charts, spreadsheets, lists she'd prepared long before today. She tapped the top page. "This is our new financial restructuring plan." The way she said "our" twisted something inside me. She spoke like a supervisor addressing an employee who'd underperformed. "This plan will help optimize household decision-making," she continued. "Clear roles, clear responsibilities." Randall slid a document across the table toward me. "We'll need your signature here. It acknowledges shared household authority." The paper looked simple at first, intentionally simple. That was the trick. But I learned long ago that if someone wants something from you fast, the details are where the danger hides. I read every line carefully. Something felt off. Then I saw it, a second page tucked subtly underneath. Different font, different formatting. Like it wasn't meant to be examined too closely. I pulled it out. Property interest reassignment. My throat tightened. Before I could fully process it, Marissa nudged the paper closer with 2 fingers. "It's just a formality," she said lightly. "This gives my family emergency authority over the house if something happens. Couples do this all the time." But the fine print told a different story. Not emergency authority. Not temporary. It would add her name to the deed and transfer a portion of ownership. Randall leaned back, arms crossed. "Go on, Alden. It's normal. Married couples share assets. Normal." That word again, so casually used to justify things that weren't remotely normal. My hand tightened around the edge of the table. Every muscle in my body went still. I looked at the signature line, my name printed neatly beneath it, waiting. I didn't pick up the pen. The room changed instantly. The air thickened. Marissa's polite expression slipped into something colder. "You don't trust us?" she asked. Eudora followed with, "We rearranged our schedules to help you, dear. The least you can do is meet us halfway." Jace muttered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Someone's afraid of commitment." I felt my jaw tense. Leaving the table would have escalated things, so I stayed seated, quiet, absorbing every word. Silence can be a shield. I let them fill the room with their assumptions, their judgments, their rehearsed lines. The more they talked, the clearer their intentions became. Eventually, I stood and excused myself, saying I needed air. The moment I stepped outside, the cool morning breeze felt like a lifeline. I walked down to the edge of the driveway. far enough that their voices blurred into background noise. My phone buzzed. Nolan. If there was one person whose voice I needed right then, it was his. Alden, he said softly, I don't want to alarm you, but what your wife is doing, it sounds a lot like the financial control cases we've dealt with at work. I closed my eyes. Hearing someone else say it, out loud, stripped away the fog I'd been stuck in. Nolan, I murmured. They tried to get me to sign property paperwork. He didn't hesitate. Do not sign anything. Once your name is tied with someone else's on property, undoing it becomes a battle. Protect yourself. Slow everything down. A calm settled over me. Not comfort, but clarity. Someone finally saw what I saw. When the call ended, I stayed outside a moment, longer, letting the stillness settle. Through the window, I spotted Dad's key hook hanging on the wall near the entrance. The same hook I used last night before everything shifted. It held a deeper meaning now. A reminder of a simpler time, a steadier foundation. If I didn't act soon, nothing in this house would belong to me anymore. Not the hook, not the walls, not even the choices I made inside them. I need to think, I whispered, and I need to think fast. By the time I walked back inside, my expression was calm again, familiar, unthreatening. But behind it, everything had changed. I would cooperate just enough to keep the peace. But now, I was watching every move they made. It only took one overheard conversation to reveal everything. That morning, the air in the house felt staged, like a set someone had meticulously reset overnight, clearing the clutter not for comfort, but to hide something. The noise, the movement, the casual dominance from the night before, gone. In its place was a manufactured quiet, too perfect to trust. I moved slowly down the hallway, my socked feet silent on the hardwood. The usual creaks of the floor seemed louder today, like the house itself was warning me. As I passed the guest room, what used to be my quiet reading space, I heard voices, low, hushed, intentional. I stopped. Marissa's voice, smooth but sharp, drifted through the cracked door. By the time he realizes what's happening, the house will already be under shared authority. I didn't move. Randall's voice followed. Once the documents go through, he's stuck. A soft guy like him can't fight it. He'll cave, Eudora chimed in, not missing a beat. And if he resists, we'll say he's unstable. People will believe us. It's not hard to plant doubt. Then Jace, laughing softly, he won't even see it coming. He's too passive. He'll sit there smiling while we clean house. I stepped back like I'd touched fire. The world didn't just tilt. It dropped out from under me. This wasn't just a misguided intervention or family overreach. This was a premeditated plan. A hostile, deliberate takeover. I turned and walked quickly, but quietly, through the hallway, bypassing the kitchen and slipping out the back door. The cold morning air stung my face. My hands were shaking. Not with anger, not yet. This was something deeper. They weren't just trying to control my life. They were trying to erase me from it. I sat on the edge of the patio, elbows on my knees, trying to slow my breathing. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. I wanted to call Nolan to tell him what I just heard, but I stopped. I needed more than words. I needed proof. If I was going to stop this, I couldn't just react. I had to observe, document, stay one step ahead. When I re-entered the house, I slipped back into the role they expected, the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves. I passed Eudora in the hallway. She gave me a practiced smile and patted my shoulder like I was a patient in her care. I nodded and kept walking, heart pounding under the surface. In the kitchen, Marissa was pouring tea, her tone sweet as honey. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, almost too brightly. "Just listening," I said calmly, keeping my eyes steady on hers. She tilted her head slightly, thrown off for a second, then smiled. "Well, good. That's progress." They were watching me like I was a child they were babysitting, but they didn't realize I was watching back now, with both eyes wide open. I walked through the dining room later that afternoon. The paperwork from the so-called financial restructuring plan was still on the table. Left there, maybe to normalize it, maybe to push me to sign without confrontation. Instead, I photographed every page with my phone, quietly, one by one. I made copies of every document I could find and slipped them into an envelope, then tucked it deep in the storage compartment behind the driver's seat in my truck. Not the glove box, too obvious. Not the house, no longer safe. That night, after everyone had gone to bed and the house fell into that uneasy hush again, I sat at my desk and reset every one of my online accounts, email, banking, work systems. I changed recovery numbers, added two-factor authentication, and backed up everything to an encrypted folder I controlled. I didn't make a sound. No dramatic confrontation, no arguments, just quiet moves. Marissa noticed something shift in me by evening. When she came into the living room, I was standing by the window, looking out, hands in my pockets. She paused, eyeing me carefully. "You're quiet today," she said, soft but measured. I turned slowly, met her gaze without blinking. "I'm listening," I replied. A flicker crossed her face, confusion or maybe unease. She didn't push. I knew then that silence had become my advantage. The less I gave, the less she could twist. And she knew it. I started cataloging everything. Who said what, when? What documents were moved? What rooms were reorganized? Where conversations happened? This wasn't just about holding on to my home anymore. It was about defending my name, my stability, my dignity. They saw me as soft, but I wasn't soft. I was calculating. And I was learning their playbook, line by line. The next morning would bring another round, another push toward finalizing everything. But I'd be ready. And this time, I wouldn't just watch. I'd act. They waited until I was cornered to deliver the hardest blow yet. I felt that truth the moment I opened my eyes the next morning. The house didn't feel like mine anymore. The air was heavy with someone else's rhythm, someone else's authority. When I stepped into the hallway, I moved slower than usual, trying to prepare for whatever version of my life they had decided to rearrange overnight. The living room lights were already on. Jace sat on my couch, my spot, leaned back with a bowl of cereal balanced on his stomach, his shoes resting on the armrest like it belonged to him. He didn't even acknowledge me walking in. A few feet away, Trent was tapping on my laptop. Not a spare laptop, not a guest laptop. My personal one. He nodded toward me without lifting his eyes. "Hey, Alden, your Wi-Fi password was easy to guess." Eudora was in the kitchen again, opening cabinets and shifting items around as if she were arranging a store display. She said, "This layout never made sense." Then she moved my coffee mugs to a completely different shelf. "You'll thank me later." And Marissa? She was at the counter, thumbs flying across her phone. She didn't even look up when I came in. Whatever she was planning, she had been working on it since sunrise. I stood there quietly, taking it all in. Something was building, an invisible storm tightening around me. Then my phone rang. HR department. A cold pulse shot through my chest. I stepped outside before answering, using the fresh air to brace myself. "Hi, Alden," the HR rep said gently. "We wanted to confirm a request we received this morning. Your wife called asking us to reroute your paycheck to a different account. She said it was urgent." I closed my eyes. "No, I do not authorize that." "Understood," they replied. "We had a feeling we should verify with you directly." A short pause. "You may want to secure your login credentials. We've seen situations like this before." When the call ended, I stared at the screen, stunned. Someone at work now believed I couldn't manage my own income. This wasn't just financial intrusion. They were dismantling my reputation, piece by piece. When I stepped back inside, the house felt smaller, tighter. Then I saw it. A sheet of paper taped to the refrigerator. House rules. Rule 1. All spending must be approved. Rule 2. Alden must consult Marissa before making work decisions. Rule 3. Family areas are communal. Guests may adjust as needed. Rule 4. Keys stay in the shared bowl near the entrance. I scanned the bottom of the page. Implemented until further notice. The proposed bowl for the keys sat directly under my father's wooden hook. They hadn't moved it yet, but the message was unmistakable. Erase the old, replace it with them. I felt something break, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, deep inside. A quiet unraveling. For a moment, I asked myself if maybe going along with them would be easier. If staying silent might buy peace. But then I saw Trent's jacket, carelessly tossed over my father's key hook, dangling there as if the memories attached to that wood meant nothing. I walked over slowly, lifted the jacket off, folded it once, and placed it on the counter. Then I straightened the key hook with my fingertips. A tiny adjustment, barely noticeable, but to me, it felt like staking a claim. Marissa came around the corner just in time to see it. "You don't get to rewrite my life in front of me," I said, my voice steady. Her expression tightened. "We're fixing your life, Alden. Stop resisting what's best." I noticed her family shift subtly around her, closing in, closing ranks, forming a wall of agreement she expected me to crumble against. But I didn't. I held my ground, quiet but firm. Something in the room changed then, not loud or dramatic, but enough that Marissa blinked, confused for a moment, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. I stepped back, letting the moment settle. The fatigue inside me was still there, aching, but under it a new heat was forming. Not rage, resolve. I turned toward the key hook again, touching it gently. This was my home, my life, my history, and I wasn't handing it away. I whispered to myself, low enough no one else could hear, "I'm not done." Later that evening, as the house shifted into another forced stillness, Marissa raised her voice just enough to make sure I heard her from across the room. "Tomorrow we finalize everything. I don't want arguments." I looked up at her and answered calmly, "I heard you." What I didn't say, what I kept tucked behind that calm tone, was the part that mattered most. I was finally ready to fight back. And the moment I woke up the next morning, I could feel they knew it, because everything around me had shifted again, tightened again, as if they were determined to crush whatever strength I had managed to recover overnight. They escalated their tactics the very next day, determined to break me before I could stand up for myself. When I stepped out of my bedroom, the house felt wrong. Too quiet, too neat, too carefully arranged. Not the kind of neatness that comes from pride. No, This was the kind that feels staged, like someone was preparing a space for an inspection. Eudora moved around the kitchen with stiff, urgent movements. She barely looked at me, and when she did, her eyes darted away as if she'd been warned not to talk. Randall and Jace whispered near the dining table. They stopped the second I got close, which told me everything I needed to know. They were preparing something, and whatever it was, I wasn't meant to see it yet. I walked into the living room, already uneasy. Then I noticed something that hit me like a cold slap. The drawer where I kept my personal documents, the deed copy, my insurance papers, the binder with my tax records, was empty, gone. I turned toward Marissa, who was straightening a stack of towels like she was decorating for a hotel. "Where are my documents?" I asked. She didn't even look up. "They're somewhere safe. You don't need to stress about paperwork." That sentence chilled me more than anything she'd said so far. People only hide paperwork when they want to control the outcome. Before I could question her again, she clapped her hands lightly and said, "We're going out today. Brunch with my relatives. Everyone's meeting us there." I didn't want to go, but I realized something. If they were planning a move, they wanted the whole family present. If I stayed home, I'd lose the chance to see it coming. So I agreed. At the restaurant, the plan unfolded quickly. Marissa greeted her relatives with practiced warmth, sliding into the center of the table as if she were the head of a committee. Then she raised her voice just enough to carry. "He's going through a rough phase," she said, gesturing toward me. "I'm handling all the decisions for him." A polite hush slid over the table. That kind of polite where everyone pretends to be sympathetic but is really leaning in to hear more. She went on. "He struggles with responsibility sometimes. I'm helping him stay on track." Someone nodded. Someone else murmured, "That's good of you." I kept my eyes forward, breathing slow. The lies didn't surprise me. What stunned me was the tone. Smooth, steady, like she'd told this story before. Then she squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Just go along. It's easier that way." I didn't pull my hand back, but I looked at her long enough for her expression to flicker, just barely. I could feel every eye around us studying me, measuring me against the story she'd crafted. And in that moment, I understood her strategy perfectly. Make me look unstable. Make herself look like the caretaker. Make her family look like the support system. If that narrative stuck, undoing it would be nearly impossible. I stayed silent, not out of fear, out of strategy. Anything I said would be twisted. Silence gave me room to observe. When the plates were cleared, I excused myself, saying I needed air. No one stopped me. Why would they? In their minds, the story was already written. I drove home alone. The house was silent when I walked in. Too silent. On the dining table sat a neatly arranged stack of documents, each one labeled with a sticky note that read, "Sign before 5 p.m. The papers included a joint account authorization, a payroll redirection consent, a temporary guardianship for financial matters, form listing Randall as co-decision maker." There it was, their big move. I sat down, took a breath, then another, and I read every word, every clause, every hidden condition, every line that tried to disguise control as support. When I finished, I set the pen down. And I didn't sign a single thing. A few minutes later, the front door opened. Marissa first, then Randall, then the others trailing behind her. She spotted the unsigned papers and froze. Randall stepped forward, jaw tight. "You had one simple job today." Jace muttered, "Man, this is unbelievable." Marissa approached me slowly, voice syrup-sweet but edged with warning. "Alden, sweetheart, why are you making this hard?" I looked directly at her. "Because I'm still here, and this is still my house." The room shifted then, a subtle rearranging of power. My calm didn't just surprise them, it unsettled them. They weren't prepared for resistance that wasn't loud or emotional. They didn't know how to push back against quiet strength. Randall stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his size, but I didn't move. And for the first time, they all saw it. I wasn't breaking. Not anymore. Marissa's expression tightened, her voice dropping to a whisper meant only for me. "If you don't cooperate, the next step won't be pleasant." I held her gaze and replied quietly, "I'm sure it won't, but I'm not signing anything." Inside, my resolve burned steady. They had made their move. Now I would make mine. And that shift in my thinking followed me into the next morning like a shadow, steady, quiet, and ready. They hit me where it hurt most, my reputation. I didn't even realize the attack had started until my phone buzzed while I was pouring a cup of coffee. A text from a former coworker popped up. "Hey man, is everything okay? Just checking in." I frowned. We hadn't spoken in months. Before I could reply, another came through. "Heard you step down? That true?" I stared at the screen, waiting for it to make sense. I hadn't stepped down from anything. My job was steady. My work record spotless. Then my voicemail notification blinked. I stepped onto the back porch for a little privacy and pressed play. "Alden. Hey, it's Mark from the lab. I'm sorry to hear about everything. Didn't know you were dealing with financial problems. Call if you need anything." Financial problems? Step down? What did they think was happening? My stomach tightened. Something was wrong, and the pattern was too familiar to ignore. I opened my email next. A message from a supervisor I barely interacted with. "If you need time off for personal matters, let us know." Personal matters. The phrase people use when they're trying not to say something more blunt. I felt a cold rush crawl across my shoulders. This wasn't random. Someone was feeding them these ideas. And there was only one person with access to both my phone and my professional circle. Marissa. I drove to work, trying to push down the rising panic. But the moment I stepped into the building, it all became clear. A colleague stopped me near the break room. "Hey, sorry about what you're going through," he said softly. I didn't even know how to respond. By the time I reached my workstation, the truth was obvious. Marissa hadn't just discussed our marriage issues. She had gone straight into my professional world, planting seeds of doubt like she was preparing a legal case. And she framed it perfectly. Alden is struggling financially. Alden is emotionally inconsistent. Alden might need reduced responsibilities. I'm helping him manage things. Supportive, concerned, loving. The kind of tone that disarms people while poisoning the well. My throat felt tight. I wasn't just being undermined at home. She was stripping away my credibility in the one place I'd always felt capable. I left work early, needing space to think. I sat in my car with the engine running, hands on the wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. For almost an hour, I didn't move. Old memories crept in, the kind of memories that echo long after childhood ends. Stay quiet. Don't make waves. Let people help you. Follow the lead. Those voices had shaped too many years of my life, and sitting there in that parking lot, I felt them pulling me back under. I pulled out my phone. For a moment, I started typing a message to Marissa. "Let's just talk. But I deleted it because I knew exactly what would happen. She'd twist it, shape it, use it as proof of instability. No, not this time. I drove home, slower than usual, giving myself time to breathe. As I turned into my own driveway, I noticed a few cars parked along the street, unfamiliar ones. When I walked inside, I understood why. Neighbors were gathered in my living room. Not friends, neighbors. People who waved politely but knew nothing about me. Eudora was in the center of the room, speaking with confidence. "He might need to file for bankruptcy," she said softly, like someone sharing a sad secret. Randall chimed in. "We're doing everything we can to help. He's lucky the family stepped in." A few neighbors murmured something sympathetic. Others shifted awkwardly, as if standing too close to me might cause bad luck to rub off on them. That was the moment I walked in. Every voice stopped, every pair of eyes turned toward me, and I saw the same look I'd seen at brunch, a quiet mixture of pity and judgment, as if I'd already failed at something I didn't even know I was accused of. I stood still, letting the silence stretch. My pulse beat steadily. Not fast. Something in me was hardening, crystallizing. I turned to the room and asked calmly, "Who told you I'm losing my house?" The neighbors exchanged glances. No one wanted to answer. Randall finally shrugged. "We're just trying to help you save face." I nodded once. "No," I said. "You're trying to erase mine." That line landed. I could feel the room shift, like someone had cracked a window and let fresh air in. Marissa stepped forward quickly, plastering on a compassionate expression. "Honey, they were just worried." I cut her off, my voice steady. "You don't get to speak for me anymore." The neighbor's eyes widened slightly, not because I raised my voice, I didn't, but because the tone was new, grounded, direct. The gathering ended quickly after that. People excused themselves, suddenly remembering things they needed to do elsewhere. When the last door shut behind them, Marissa rounded on me. "You embarrassed us!" she snapped. I faced her without flinching. "You tried to bury me." Randall stepped closer, shoulders squared. "If you keep resisting, we'll take this public, all of it." I looked him directly in the eye and said, "You already did." That line sat between us like a stone in water. Heavy. Unavoidable. For the first time, they understood something. I wasn't backing down. I wasn't afraid. And I wasn't confused anymore. That night, when the house finally quieted, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. I reviewed everything. Documents, messages, screenshots, bank records, anything with a timestamp or a digital trail. Patterns appeared. Contradictions emerged. And one. Truth stood out. They were sloppy when they felt powerful. That would be their undoing. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. Not to strike yet. Not to lash out in anger. But to prepare. Because they'd started a war they assumed I'd lose. And they assumed wrong. When I closed the laptop, the house felt strangely still. Not peaceful, just paused, like the moment before a storm makes landfall. I whispered to myself, steady and certain, "You want to fight? Fine, but I won't be the one who loses." They struck at the one place I never imagined they'd target. My security as a man and as a provider. After closing the laptop that night, I sat in the stillness of the house for a while, listening. Nothing. Not a single footstep upstairs, no murmurs from the hallway, no TV humming in the background. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the occasional pop from the old wood floors. It didn't feel like calm. It felt staged. Like the silence you hear before something collapses. I stood up and walked toward the kitchen, Jace and Eudora were standing near the sink, speaking low enough that I could barely make out their voices. They stopped mid-sentence when I came into view, pretending to focus on cleaning something that didn't need it. Randall stood by the back door with his arms crossed, not moving, not speaking, just standing there like a gatekeeper. His posture said everything. This wasn't just another awkward evening. This was something else. Marissa wasn't in sight, which was even more unsettling. No sarcasm, no passive-aggressive sighs, just absence. Something was building. I could feel it in my chest like a storm rolling in. A few minutes later, Marissa appeared in the hallway and called my name. "Can we talk in the living room?" It wasn't a question. It was a summons. I followed her in, and what I saw made my stomach tighten. She was seated on the armchair, hands folded. Behind her, lined across the couch like a jury, sat her family: Jace, Eudora, Randall. There was no invitation to sit, no smile, no opening statement, just a printed paper in Marissa's hand. "We've talked this through," she said, her tone clipped. "You either sign over shared control of the finances and all household decisions, or you leave until you're ready to cooperate." I looked at the paper. It wasn't a contract. It was a verdict. There were bullet points, conditions, deadlines. Not a discussion, a demand. I stood frozen for a second, trying to decide whether to laugh or ask if this was some kind of twisted role play. But then Randall stood up. "Then pack a bag," he said, voice low and final. "You're out until you come to your senses." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "It's not a punishment," Marissa said smoothly, holding up a folder like a trump card. "It's just protection." She opened the folder and spread out the contents on the coffee table. Photos, screenshots, old messages I'd sent, edited, highlighted, out of context. It was a fabrication, me painted as erratic, stressed, financially unstable. "If you don't leave willingly," she continued, "I'll have no choice but to send this to your employer. You know how sensitive they are to mental health and liability." That's when I understood. She didn't just want control. She was preparing to erase me. The room swam for a second. Not from anger. Something worse. Disbelief. Not once had I imagined the person I married would take the worst parts of my life and twist them into weapons. Her family sat with arms crossed, their faces smug with certainty. They'd won. And for the first time in this entire mess, I didn't feel just betrayed. I felt unsafe. I took one slow step toward the key hook on the wall, the one my father had made by hand decades ago. It was still there, still crooked in the same way it always was. I reached out and gently straightened it. It reminded me who I was, who I came from, what I stood for. I turned back to the table and stared at the paper again. For a brief moment, I considered it. Signing. Surrendering. Just ending this war. Then I heard HR's voice in my mind again. "Protect your access. Watch who has control." I remembered the neighbors' stares, the pity, the judgment. I remembered Marissa's words at brunch, how easily she painted me as a burden. And something in me shifted. Not anger, clarity. I picked up the paper, folded it once, and placed it back down. "This is the last time you'll ever threaten me," I said calmly. Marissa smirked. "You don't have the backbone to fight us." I met her eyes. "You're going to wish that were true." Even Randall paused. The air changed. Even the silence felt different. I didn't raise my voice, didn't break anything, didn't give them a single ounce of drama they could use. Instead, I reached for my jacket, slipped it on, and headed for the front door. Not because I was giving up, because I was done playing by their rules. I felt their eyes follow me as I moved. No one tried to stop me. That told me everything. They were certain I'd leave in shame, crawl away, and come back broken. They'd underestimated me. Again. I stepped out into the cool night, the sky heavy with clouds. As I reached the end of the driveway, I turned around and looked at the house. My house. And I whispered, just loud enough for myself to hear, "You made one mistake. You taught me exactly how far you're willing to go." This time, I wasn't returning home to negotiate. I was returning to end it. After I walked away that night, I didn't drift or hide. I didn't sit in my truck staring into the dark, wondering what to do next. I knew exactly what needed to happen. And for the first time in weeks, my thoughts felt sharp, clear, almost steady. For 2 full days, I prepared, not rushing, not scrambling, just quietly, methodically, putting the truth in order. I pulled bank statements showing my name alone on every account tied to the house. I printed the title documents, mortgage history, and every piece of correspondence proving sole ownership. I gathered screenshots, Marissa's texts, her voice messages, the half-whispered notes she thought I wasn't recording, even the voicemail HR left, confirming she tried shifting my payroll without permission. A neighbor stopped me while I watered the small patch of grass outside my temporary rental. She told me she didn't like what she heard at the gathering. I asked if she'd be willing to repeat those rumors in a voice memo. She nodded. People underestimate how willing others are to correct wrongs once they see harm done. Then I met with a lawyer, a calm man, gray at the temples, polite but firm. When he finished reviewing everything, he leaned back in his chair and let out a breath. "You have enough to file for divorce, a temporary restraining order, and to fully protect every asset that belongs to you," he said. "And you have enough to do it without delay." The word enough hit me harder than I expected. For weeks, I'd been drowning in confusion, twisting myself into knots trying to make sense of what was happening. And now someone was confirming what I couldn't see before. I wasn't losing control. I finally had leverage. By late afternoon of the second day, the paperwork was drafted and signed, a packet thick enough to hold every truth they had tried so carefully to bury. When I drove back to my house, the house my father once walked through, the house I worked years to keep, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger either, just purpose. The driveway felt strangely familiar again as I pulled in. Inside, I could hear laughter, Marissa's family talking loudly, pots clanging, footsteps moving in and out of the kitchen. They sounded like people celebrating a victory they thought was guaranteed. They didn't even notice when I opened the door. I stepped inside and felt the shift almost immediately. Their voices dropped one by one, fading as each of them realized I was standing there. Marissa turned first, ready to deliver another lecture, another attempt at control. But before she could speak, I placed the large envelope on the coffee table. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, "effective immediately." Everything went still. No one sat. No one blinked. Even the air felt suspended. I continued, keeping my tone level. "You have 24 hours to leave my property. The documents in that envelope prove this house belongs to me alone. Every account, every signature, every record." Randall let out a dry scoff, the same kind he always used to belittle anything he didn't understand. I handed him a printed copy of the restraining order request with the judge's stamp on top. His expression changed. Jay stepped forward, voice tight. "You can't do this." "I already did," I replied. Marissa looked at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. For weeks, she treated me like someone easily shaped, easily pushed into corners, someone who'd fold under pressure. Now she was staring at someone she didn't know how to predict. Then came the knock at the door. I opened it, and a uniformed officer greeted me calmly. My lawyer had arranged everything. Emergency protective orders filed, reviewed, and accepted. The officer stepped inside and addressed the room with professionalism so controlled it cut the tension in half. Marissa Collins, Randall Collins, Jace Collins, Eudora Collins. They all nodded, stiff and startled. You are required to vacate the property immediately. You will have the opportunity to collect essential items, but you must leave the premises tonight. Marissa broke first. You're ruining everything, she shouted, her voice cracking. No, I said quietly. I'm ending what you started. Eudora's face fell. Jace muttered something under his breath, but the officer motioned for silence. Randall's bravado evaporated. He gathered bags with trembling hands. One by one, they were escorted out. Marissa was the last. She stopped in the doorway and stared at me as if trying to rewrite the outcome through will alone. You think you won? She said. I answered gently. I think I survived. And the door closed. For the first time in weeks, the house fell quiet in a way that didn't feel threatening, not staged, not manipulated, just still. I moved through each room slowly. The kitchen counters cluttered with their things. The living room where they held their family meetings. The dining table where they tried to rewrite my life. The hallway where I first overheard the conversations that revealed everything. And then I reached the wooden key hook. My father's simple handiwork. The symbol they tried to overshadow with their bowl of shared keys, their rules, their so-called structure. I touched it lightly. This time, it didn't steady me because I was shaken. It felt like recognition. A quiet nod from the past saying, "You finally stood up." I made a slow lap around the house before sitting at the table. The space felt both familiar and foreign, freeing and heavy, relief mixed with sadness in a way I couldn't fully untangle. I knew the months ahead wouldn't be simple. Divorce never is. Betrayal lingers even after justice arrives. Healing isn't a straight line. But I also knew something else. I had reclaimed my life. I whispered into the quiet room, I should have stood up sooner, but I'm glad I finally did. Outside, evening settled over the neighborhood with a calm that felt new. I stepped out onto the porch and inhaled deeply. The air felt cool, steady, honest. And I said to myself, softly but certain, I'm not scared of starting over. Not anymore.